liberty, and justice for all. Roll call.
Commissioner Kirsten Tucker.
Here.
Commissioner Hanson.
Here.
Commissioner Ramirez.
Here.
Commissioners Simonson and Duretsky are absent today. Staff is represented by Monowitz, Fox, and Shu.
In the beginning of our planning commission, we always reserve time for the audience to speak to us on items that are not on the agenda. The second item on our agenda, Laurel Enterprises, has been removed. So if you're here for that, we will not be having any formal hearings, but if you wish to speak to us, because you did show up, you will be allowed in this period of oral communication to talk to us, but we will not be able to, all we'll be able to do is to accept what you're telling us, but won't be able to publicly comment or make a judgment on it. So at this time, do we have anybody who wishes to speak to the commission on items that are not on the agenda? We don't. Okay. Anybody in the audience wish to speak to us? Not seeing any. We'll close that portion and we'll go to the consideration of the minutes.
I will move that we approve the minutes as presented.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion in front of us. All those in favor say aye.
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 It passes 3-0. We'll move to our first item, the BigWave Group. Could you read that in for us this morning, Heather?
The owner is BigWave Group and BigWave LLC. The applicant is David Byers with file number PLN 2013-00451. The location is Airport Street in Princeton by the Sea.
Thank you.
Good morning, commissioners. Let's see. So the purpose of this informational item is to update the Planning Commission to provide an update from the 2010 Big Wave project, where you last saw the sort of a different version, original version of the project. Actually, it was just Hanson. But and to also bring up the other commissioners to speed with the current project. So I'll be describing the revised project, describing the CEQA determination, as well as the rest of the county permitting process, summarizing the results of the addendum that was released, and also you'll be receiving comments from the public as a part of the 30-day courtesy public comment period as directed by the Community Development Director. Oh, I should mention that Kate Werner from TRA Consultants is here with us, and also Scott Holmes, the applicant. Okay, so this slide shows an aerial view of the two project parcels. The larger parcel's what we're calling the north parcel. The smaller one in yellow is the south parcel. The current zoning of the two parcels is generally M1, which is light manufacturing, and DR for design review for the north parcel, and waterfront zoning and design review for the south parcel. There's an AO, which is an airport overlay strip over the frontage area on Airport Street, as well as portions of the riparian drainage, riparian area are zoned RMCZ, and those are the wetland areas. Oh, and you'll notice that the Pillar Ridge Mobile Home Park is to the north of the north parcel, and the Princeton area is to the south of the south parcel, and the airport is across the street. These are views from Airport Street of the south parcel on the left. You'll see the Princeton buildings in the background, and a view of the north parcel on the right, which shows the current agricultural use as well as the Pillar Ridge structures in the background. So just to provide you some history on this, the Planning Commission certified the 2010 EIR in October 2010. Then that approval, the Planning Commission's approval, was appealed to the Board of Supervisors, and the appeal was denied in March 2011, and the 2010 project approved. Then their decision, the board's decision, was appealed to the California Coastal Commission, and in August 2012, the appeal was sustained. They found substantial issues, the Coastal Commission, and they denied the project. Then in October 2013, I guess the time in between, the applicant worked with the Coastal Commission, Committee for Green Foothills, Granada Sanitary, and Montero Water, in order to resolve some of the issues. These were the appellants. In order to bring the county a revised project in October 2013. I should also note that the project was deemed complete in May 2014. So just to refresh your memories, this was the 2010 project site plan. It included 8 office park buildings. The front row along Airport Street would have been 4 two-story buildings, and the back row would have been 4 three-story buildings, as well as about 100-foot wetland buffer areas, plenty of parking. And then on the south parcel, there would have been the Wellness Center, which, as you can see, is sort of right along, there's a line there that divides the airport overlay area zoning from the rest of the parcel. So the Wellness Center residential areas would have been right behind that line. And there's actually a portion of the structure in the airport overlay that would not have contained residential uses. And then there's a building off to the side that would have also been residential, a smaller building. So this is the current site plan. In orange is the Wellness Center parcel. It contains 4 buildings on one parcel. It contains the first building at the front would not be residential, the rest would be. As far as the office park parcel sort of is shown in blue. That office park area is subdivided such that each building would be on its own parcel. There would be 5 total, and they would be about 3 stories each, except for building A, but they're all about the same height. The current proposal includes a boat storage on the south parcel, and that's about it, where originally the Wellness Center and the office park were divided among the 2 parcels. So you'll see sort of on the southern end of the south parcel, an area of boat parking, and you'll see a line of public access, coastal access public parking along the front of the south parcel. And there'll also be designated spots on the north parcel for coastal access parking.
If I could interrupt you, when you're talking about the boat parking, are you talking about parking for immediate access, or you're talking long-term parking as in storage?
I imagine, the applicant might be sort of more appropriate to answer that question, but there's a security gate around the boat storage lot where the lot could be accessed by sort of a passcode. So I imagine they can keep their boat there as long as they want, whether short or long, but it won't be manned. What's that? Immediate access. Yeah, say on the weekends or whatnot. So the current elevations for the north parcel alternative, both of these parcels actually show Wellness Center Building 1, and this is a 1-story building that does not contain residential uses. It incorporates siding, hardy plank siding, as well as stucco materials, generally earth tone colors with some sort of marine-themed accents. Let's see here. It's sort of more architecturally interesting building. And the floor plan, as you can see, contains mostly recreational and fitness uses. And the fitness center would only be available for Wellness Center residents and their guests. This is building 2, the Wellness Center. It is a residential building with a basement on the bottom, I believe either for storage or a pool. It's a little flexible but non-habitable. The floor plan on the left shows you a basic residential unit. This one shows 2 bedrooms and a common area in between. However, the design of each of the units, let's call them, but although they do not contain kitchens, would be based on demand. Some might be studios, some might be 3 bedrooms per se. However, there would be only 57 bedrooms maximum. It would not exceed that amount, nor would it exceed 50 developmentally disabled adults and 20 aides. So this is building 3. It's a two-story building containing residential on top, and then the bottom story is, once again, we're calling it a basement because it's basically uninhabitable. It is above ground. And it would contain actually a large fire tank up to about 200,000 gallons. And then building 4 would be 3 stories. And it would contain 2 stories of residential and a theater, kitchen, and dining room on the bottom floor, basement floor. And the reason why all of the ground level floors do not have residential uses are to sort of raise the residential elevation above the tsunami inundation level. And I'll go over that in more detail. These are elevations showing the office park buildings. Buildings A, C, and E have a particular elevation. Buildings B and D, I believe, have a more narrow elevation. Let's see, the color scheme and the materials used are similar to the Wellness Center. There's hardy plank siding, there's stucco, there's sort of marine-themed accent colors. As you can see, the floor plan is really to be determined. It's just a cold shell at this point. I have to say that the architecture itself is a bit of a prototype. It depends on the type of tenants that would move in, and it could be either office, R&D, manufacturing, which may require roll-up doors and things like that. So it's a bit of a prototype.
Question?
Yes.
Since we're not doing design review here,
That's correct.
when we approve this project, are we approving the design at that point, or are we saying, well, now we have a tenant, we know what the shell is going to look like, and we'll come back for approval of the design?
So basically, the project is going through the design review committee as we speak, pretty much. They went in July. The item was continued till September 11th. So that committee will make a recommendation to the Planning Commission, of which you'll make the ultimate decision. If the main elements remain in place after a tenant is identified, with just sort of minor changes, I don't think it'll come back. But if we deem them to be sort of major enough to warrant a hearing, they would come back.
Okay. I understand.
Okay. So this table describes the parking. On the north parcel, there would be 462 spaces divided between the Wellness Center and the Office Park. There's also public access parking spaces, but there's 42 spaces allocated to the Wellness Center, 420 to the Office Park. Based on that project parking amount, the LCP requires 20% coastal access public parking. That comes to 92 parking spaces for public access. The 92 spaces required are divided between the north parcel with 63 public spaces and the south parcel with 29. Total project parking is 554 parking spaces, with parking in total divided among the parcels of 525 for the north parcel and 29 for the south parcel. This slide shows the landscaping plan for the project. The parking lot trees are 24-inch box. They have like sort of a red circle around them. They're native trees. Let's see. And then the sort of shaded polygons kind of near the wetland areas are going to be riparian, upland, meadow, and organic farming areas. So the sort of the areas of wetland will be sort of natural habitat, really, designed by an ecologist, with more detail in the addendum. And then the areas outside the wetland would be organic farming. So the two parcels would continue to be farmed. This shows the phasing plan. It's a 15-year phasing plan for the NPA project. Let's see here. There would be 4 phases. Under phase 1, which is the first 5 years, the project applicant would be constructing the wellness center buildings and the associated parking, the boat storage area, the coastal access parking on the south parcel, all within those first 5 years, and also landscaping the wetland areas on the south parcel. Then, in the second phase, years 5 through 8, the office park buildings C, D, and E, which are the ones that are further set into the property, would be built, as well as the associated parking. As each building gets built, they would have to meet the county requirements for parking. Let's see, as far as phase 3, years 8 through 15, that would include the construction of the front 2 office park buildings, as well as their associated parking. And then also, they would include in phase 3 and 4, landscaping and wetland planning along the northern parcel. And that's really to, once you have that wetland riparian habitat in, you don't want it growing and sort of shrinking the project building envelope as you construct and things like that. So that's why that's last. Let's see here.
Before you leave the slide?
Yes.
So why is that last parking lot in phase 4?
Because, let's see here, that's actually phase 4. Does it say phase 4? Oh, okay. I believe it's only going to be built if it's required. So if say if a low density use comes in, then it simply wouldn't be built. I guess they turn it into landscaping or something else.
So who determines what's the load capacity of the parking lot?
The county. So as the TIs come in, if it's sort of an industrial use, a storage use versus an office use, which is a more parking intense use, then that parking may not be needed if the intensity is lower.
So what would it look like if it's not needed? Is that a separate landscape design change, or is it?
We can ask the applicant what he had in mind for that area should the parking not become needed. But I mean, tenants, I have to say that tenants change over time. And if they do at some point get more intense, it's going to turn into parking. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Let's see here. So I just sort of summarized that slide already. So this table shows you how the project has really been reduced since 2010. In terms of subdivision, there were 14 lots proposed over both of the parcels, where in this proposal there's 9 lots total, with most of the development concentrated on the north parcel. As far as the office park buildings, there were originally 8 buildings at 225,000 square feet. The proposal now is 5 buildings at 189,000 square feet. The footprints have shrunk by quite a lot. The wellness center actually remains at the same capacity, which is a good thing. And the square footage has actually been reduced slightly. Parking has been reduced due to the reduced intensity of the office park. The maximum building heights have gone down from 51 to 38 feet as far as height from slab. As far as water service, the original proposal included an on-site well, wastewater recycling, and CCWD as emergency backup. The current proposal relies solely on Montero Water and Sanitary for domestic water, and will use the ag well for really agricultural and irrigation uses. The 2010 project proposed the wastewater treatment plant. It was sort of on-site treatment and recycling of the water on site with a connection to GSD, Granada Sanitary, for emergency backup. The current proposal relies solely on GSD for wastewater treatment. Project phasing, originally it was proposed at 20 years in 2010, where construction would take place with all the buildings over 20 years. This project is over 15 years. The wetland buffer in the previous project was 100 feet, while currently on the north parcel it's 150 feet. And with the sort of less development on the south parcel, much larger on the south parcel. Oops. So as far as the CEQA process and how the county arrived at an addendum, the county retained So in light of these project changes, the county retained TRA environmental consultants to provide an analysis of the north parcel alternative and to recommend the appropriate CEQA document, considering also that the county certified an EIR in 2010 for the original BigWave project, and this is a reduced project. So per CEQA guidelines 1516, section 15162A, an EIR, when an EIR has been certified, it actually states very clearly that no subsequent EIR shall be prepared for that project unless the lead agency determines that one or more of the following circumstances exist. Either the proposed changes or new circumstances or new information exist whereby the project would result in new significant impacts or an increased severity of impacts identified previously. So as far as those three things, the consultant actually prepared a checklist, a table of sorts in the addendum, identifying what these proposed changes are, whether there's a new or increased impact. So as far as the changes, it mostly sort of were reductions in project impacts. As far as new circumstances, we identified no new circumstances. As far as new information, there was new information since 2010. The county's LCP amendment was certified by the Coastal Commission, so there's sort of new policies that are applicable to the project. The airport land use, oh God, now I'm blanking, compatibility plan is being drafted, really. Has not yet been adopted, is being currently reviewed by the Airport Land Use Committee. It was reviewed on July 31st and was continued. So I'll give you actually a little more information about the status of that. The Princeton Planning Project is ongoing, as well as the county has adopted an Energy Efficiency Climate Action Plan since 2010. So those are sort of the new regulations in place. So based on all that, the county identified an addendum to the EIR as the appropriate document to review the revised project and has not identified in the addendum any new significant impacts or an increased severity of already identified impacts. So the addendum itself was prepared by Kate Warner, as well as I'm sure others at TRA, under a direct county contract. The county also contracted with Hexagon to perform a traffic report of this reduced proposal. We wanted to see how much the traffic had actually decreased. And we retained Environmental Visions to do new visual simulations based on the sort of more condensed North Parcel alternative. Under the section that I stated, the CEQA guideline section that I stated, no circulation of the addendum is required. However, the county has distributed this document to just about everybody, whether in hard copy or web link. And we're providing, as directed by the Community Development Director, a 30-day review period for the public to review the document. And that ends September 2nd. So yes, we did notice the Coastal Commission, as well as responsible agencies, particularly Montero Water, Granada Sanitary, and LAFCO, as well as Committee for Green Foothills. They were an appellant previously. The Mid-Coast Community Council, the Pillar Ridge Mobile Home Park, other interested parties that expressed interest in 2010. You should also know that planning staff made a presentation to the Airport Land Use Committee on July 31st. It was really just a courtesy sort of following up from 2010. There was interest there, and the planning staff will be presenting tonight actually at the Mid-Coast Community Council, a similar presentation. And it really just for information for co-siders who can't make it out here. So the addendum itself is available at the county's website, as well as at the Half Moon Bay Library, as well as at the planning counter. So just to summarize the sort of the findings of the addendum by section, with regard to aesthetics, the heights of the buildings have been reduced, the number of office buildings have been reduced from 8 to 5. Let's see, the southern parcel would remain largely undeveloped. Visual simulations were prepared at 5 viewpoints. I can go, kind of see it on this slide. Number one, if you can see it, is at Capistrano and Highway 1. The second viewpoint is at the Half Moon Bay Airport, all looking towards the project parcel. Highway 1 at the airport there. And number three, oh, sorry, 3 is at Capistrano. 1 is at Airport Street, sort of right at the northern corner. And then 4 is at the radio tower. And 5 is at Pillar Point Bluff behind the mobile home park. And I'll show you here the results of those. I should also state that the visual simulations accounted for 2 points in time at project completion, which is shown on the top right, and at 15 years from project completion, where landscaping reaches sort of full maturity, and that's at the bottom. The existing view of the site is shown on the top left corner. So the existing view shows agricultural fields. At project completion, you'll see buildings, newly planted trees, and then at 15 years, you'll see the project landscaping come to full maturity. I should actually state that one of the comments of the design review in July were that they wanted a smoother transition in the landscaping from surrounding areas into the project parcel. So while it's sort of a wall of vegetation at the current moment, it's going to be sort of more transitioned, where it's going to start at a lower level and build up, but still provide full screening of the project. So the second viewpoint is from the airport. Let's see. You can see at project completion, you'll see the buildings, but they don't necessarily interrupt the ridge line there. And you'll see on the bottom slide that once landscaping grows in a bit, it'll be a little bit better screened. And you'll see a lot of intervening development, obviously, with the airport in between. So this view is from Capistrano Road at Highway 1. You'll see trees, a lot of trees and topography in the background. So the buildings would be up against the vegetation with better screening at 15 years. At Pillar Point Radio Tower, where you would see currently agricultural fields, you'll see buildings in between. You'll also see the airport in the background. And as screening grows in the 15th year, you'll see better screening. The materials are natural materials, natural colors, hopefully blending the buildings in to the landscape. Let's see, this view from Pillar Point Bluff Trail, you'll see a lot of intervening development, the mobile home park. You'll also see a view of the beach there on the corner right. So the buildings would not obscure views of that. And then, once landscaping grows in, it'll be a little bit better screened.
I got a question on those last 2 photos.
Yes, on this slide.
When I look at the roof line of the proposed project, I don't see any environmental stuff on the roof. Is it because we're not planning to put anything there, or because we plan to screen it, or we just didn't include it in this pictures and therefore I'm not seeing it?
Well, the heights of the buildings represented in the addendum and in the project description actually include all of the mechanical equipment and the solar panels that would be located on top here. So they represent the height.
The height,
but perhaps not the actual structures themselves. And we can. Oh, you don't? Okay. Perhaps we can save that question for later. Okay.
Okay.
Any others? Okay. So as far as the area of cultural resources, I could flip back, but there is an area to the west, on the west side of the south parcel, that would not be developed, that continues to contain the archaeological site, and that would not be disturbed. Let's see. As far as biology, the development footprint would be reduced. The wetland setbacks have been increased. There's no recycled wastewater component anymore, which would reduce the potential, eliminate the potential of impacts to the quantity and the quality of drainage entering the marsh. that was identified in 2010. This actually shows some new occurrences in red of the SF garter snake, which is very, very far from the project parcels. So this was since 2009. This is sort of the new occurrences. In the area of geology and soils, there's far less grading being proposed under the North Parcel alternative. Under the 2010 project, there was 22,000 cut, 26,000 fill, and that's been reduced to 735 cut, but filling with gravel of 21,400 cubic yards of gravel, and that's mostly to provide for infiltration underneath the buildings, which is required for NPDES, the stormwater program. Let's see, the fault trench, since 2010, a fault trench study was actually prepared, which found no evidence of fault traces on the project site. So that's new information that is actually beneficial to the project and doesn't show any impacts. As far as tsunami hazard, per the CalEMA tsunami and inundation map, the tsunami wave height and inundation level is 28 feet. The floor elevations for the residential components of the wellness center would be at 34 feet. So per our LCP as well as the zoning regulations, they would be far above the inundation level. As far as airport hazard and noise, as I alluded to before, the airport land use compatibility plan is sort of being prepared. And as currently drafted, it applies the 1996 ALUCP to this project as it does, as it has been deemed complete. That language may or may not actually stay in once adopted. While the county prefers the language to stay, actually the Coastal Commission has stated that the language should stay. It's sort of typical of the adoption of regulatory regulations where there is sort of a deemed complete clause in there. However, Caltrans might have some concerns regarding it. I think that's all still being hammered out. So currently it is, I believe, headed back to the Airport Land Use Committee in September. But currently as drafted, the draft would not apply to this project. And under the 1996 ALUCP, the project does comply. A large portion of the project is within the 55 to 60 dB CNEL noise contour range, where residential and business uses are compatible in that noise range. And
so if I could just ask, are you saying that there is a chance that this project could be not deemed complete and hence have the draft airport land use compatibility plan applicable to this project?
So the project will remain deemed complete. Mm-hmm. It's really whether those projects deemed complete would be subject to the 1996 plan, or if language changes in the draft, would still be subject to the either newly adopted or the newly adopted plan.
Will that be resolved by October 22nd?
We'll know more because it'll go to the ALUCP in September, and possibly, I think their time frame is to get adopted in October. They did prepare a negative declaration, and there is some question of maybe an EIR would need to be prepared. So at this current moment, it's a little bit in flux.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but I should state that the addendum addresses how the project might need to change under the new ALUCP. So that is in the addendum. Let's see, we did receive a letter regarding wind-related airport hazards. So while it's not in the addendum, I pulled some portions from the 2010 EIR in order to address that. These concerns were raised at the ALUC meeting back in 2009, as well as the recent one in July, where westward wind flows. The concern was that westward wind flows and the similarity in the scale and orientation of the buildings may result in a wind tunnel effect that exists at San Carlos Airport, which makes operations there a little more difficult. So, as stated in the DAIR, the westward wind flows, the patterns are dissimilar from the ones in San Carlos due to the differing topography of the two sites. And topography is a major factor in terms of, wind flows. Under the DEIR, it states that the potential for a project-related wind tunnel is anticipated to be low due to the terrain at the project site. The Pillar Ridge Mountains currently block prevailing winds from the west and would prevent a wind tunnel effect. And then in the FEIR, as a response to comment, the Pillar Ridge Mountains are located west of the project site and currently block winds to the site. Any tunnel effect would be minimal at this location. So it is addressed previously.
Can I ask one more question
Yes.
there? Is it the case that the pattern of this airport is only on the east side? So in other words, there isn't the approach pattern is only on the east side of the airport, is that correct?
I'm not actually sure.
I am not able to answer that question, so it's something we can look into and bring back at the next
The
hearing.
question really is there a pattern? Are airplanes prohibited from flying over the Pillar Ridge community as depending upon the prevailing winds?
I believe they're allowed to land in either direction, but there is one sort of prevailing direction of landing. And as far as where they fly over the mobile home park, I'm not actually sure, but we can't get back to you about that.
I can say that due to the prevailing northwest winds, the typical flight pattern is to take off into the wind and to land into the wind. So I believe the typical pattern is you take off heading northwest and then you make an inland turn as you're going up in elevation. Planes that are coming into land are kind of doing the opposite, coming from the east, turning around, and then landing into the wind. So I think if the question was related to the eastern side of the airport, most of the turning movements are going to the east after they take off, or if they're coming in, when they're coming in from a landing, they're typically coming in from the east.
So I guess my question really is whether there are prohibitions around the traffic. I just don't know. I haven't looked at it for a while. What the restrictions are there and whether there are any. So I'd be curious to know about.
Yes, those are contained within the airport land use compatibility plan. And as Ms. Leung explained, right now we're operating under the current ALUCP. And the method by which those regulations are established is through the delineation of safety zones. So as you get closer to the runway itself, the safety zones have much more restrictive rules regarding what can be developed. In this case, the project has been designed to comply, actually to stay without the designated safety zones so that the structures themselves will not encroach within the zones that are subject to airport regulations.
Before we proceed, just normal EIRs, we open up the session, we have questions, the public has questions, people write questions, and they get added at the end of the process where each question is individually addressed. And how is the questions today and letters coming in will be handled?
I'm glad you asked that question. In fact, once Camille wrapped up her presentation, my intention was to kind of orient the discussion in terms of what the purpose of today's hearing is and how we will go about addressing any comments received. Mm-hmm. So, what we're doing today is introducing the environmental document that we've developed, which we believe complies with the California Environmental Quality Act requirements. In a typical scenario, an EIR addendum such as this would be simply adopted if the decision makers felt it was appropriate to do so at the hearing at which the permits associated with the project were being considered. However, in this case, we thought it would be a benefit to the Commission and to the interested public to actually provide an opportunity for folks to review the addendum prior to subsequent hearings we'll be having on the permits. And any questions or comments that we receive today, we intend to respond to either in the substance of subsequent staff reports or as an exhibit or attachment to subsequent staff reports. So I would encourage those participating in today's hearing to really think about what comments they have specifically regarding the environmental review, either whether or not they believe our analysis is correct, or if they have other comments or concerns regarding this specific environmental document.
And each one will be specifically.
So with regard to the typical EIR scenario where every comment is numbered and provided a response, it's not our intent at this point to follow that same format. Our intent is to group the comments that are received into issue areas and to be responsive to each particular issue raised by the commenters.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
You're welcome.
Just a few more slides here. So with regard to noise, this might answer some of the questions regarding air traffic noise. The Wellness Center has been moved further west, further away from the airport than the 2010 project Wellness Center building. The sound insulation and noise deflection will be provided via landscaping. As with the 2010 project, there's an navigation easement required as a mitigation measure, where the tenants would be notified of, would sort of acknowledge the location of the Wellness Center close to the airport, the noise and the operation sort of associated with that, as well as be amenable to relocation should the resident not be able to accept the noise conditions. And this wording would be included in a lease agreement. So that's how that mitigation measure reads. As far as noise from project construction activity, mechanical equipment on roof, well, I guess there's not going to be any on rooftops, and project vehicle traffic, those are all reduced, along with sort of a general reduction in the project scale. As far as traffic, as I mentioned before, Hexagon prepared a traffic report. They looked at 11 intersections. The reduction in office space largely accounted for the reduction of 644 project vehicle trips from the 2010 project to the project today. And this is very hard to read, but this shows, the map on the left shows the 11 intersections that were studied. So we studied intersections along Cabrillo Highway at Maine in '92. Also particular, traffic points in Princeton, from Capistrano into Princeton, up to airport, all the way up past the Mobile Ridge home, past the Pillar Ridge Mobile Home Park, all the way up to Cypress to the north. So those were the 11 intersections.
What year was that study done?
Well, we did one in 2010 and, where am I? We did one in 2010 and there's one actually included in the addendum for the current project.
Oh, I see current date. I'm sorry.
Yeah, oh no, that's okay. So as you can see, there are identified level of service impacts on Cypress, at Cypress and Highway 1 as shown in that chart. I should also note that the traffic report in the addendum is actually not a final traffic report. There's been some back and forths between the county, DPW department, and Hexagon in terms of trying to fully address comments from the Department of Public Works to have the report comply with the county's traffic impact study guidelines. So we haven't identified any new significant impacts as of yet. However, should the results of the traffic study change or the results of the addendum, change with that traffic report, we will definitely notify you, notify the public, and talk about it then. But at this point, it's a little preliminary. But you should know that's still sort of a little bit ongoing. But this is the best information we have at the time. Let's see, as far as weekday traffic, Hexagon looked at weekday as well as weekend traffic. As far as weekday traffic, they looked at existing plus project, background plus project, and cumulative with project conditions, are the conditions that they analyzed. They found that all of the study intersections, except for the intersection of Highway 1 and Cypress, operated at a LOS, level of service, of C or better under all conditions except cumulative conditions. Under cumulative conditions, 8 of the 11 intersections operated at LOS, C or better, but at these 3 locations there was some identified impact. At Highway 1 and Capistrano, it would operate fine in the AM, but would operate at an unacceptable level of LOSE in the PM, but the project does not add any traffic to this movement, is what the report says. At Highway 1 and Main, it would operate at an unacceptable LOSE in the PM under no project and project conditions, but the project would only add a 2-second delay, where a 4-second delay is sort of the threshold of significance there. And the third identified intersection is Highway 1 and Cypress Avenue, would operate at an acceptable level of LOSF in the AM and PM, and the current report recommends mitigation for the Highway 1 at Cypress intersection of either a signal or a roundabout, or some other measure that's preferred by Caltrans. So I guess there's a Caltrans policy as well as the Midcoast Mobility Study that sort of advocates for a roundabout. So they'll have to rule that out prior to choosing any other option. So the report also looked at weekend traffic. I can summarize that better. They looked at Saturday midday peak hour intersection levels for 6 intersections along just the state highways. So it's really something the Coastal Commission wanted for Highway 1. There's some perception that Highway 1 is backed up on the weekends. And they identified that most of the study intersections would operate at a LOSC or better under all conditions. However, at the intersection of Highway 1 and Capistrano, there's an eastbound left turn movement that would operate at LOSE. D, E, and F are less than C and therefore lower than the standard of the county standard is C. However, the project would not add any trips to the movement. At Highway 1 in Cypress, the eastbound to northbound left turn movement would operate at LOSF under project conditions. This would constitute a significant impact. Therefore, the mitigation measure is currently written that addresses the improvements at Cypress and Highway 1 would also mitigate this weekend impact. So that's it for traffic. As far as utilities and service systems, water would be reduced under this NPA alternative from 26,000 GPD to 97,000 GPD, 9,700. Let's see, the previous use for the previous proposal for well use has been eliminated. They would connect to MWSD for water, and of which they have adequate capacity. And they would extend the 8-inch water main, which terminates at Pillar Ridge Mobile Home Community, and bring it down to the project site for domestic and fire water service. As far as wastewater, there would be a wastewater reduction with the MPA alternative from 26,000 to 9,700. They would eliminate the previous proposal for on-site wastewater treatment and recycling and connect to GSD, of which GSD has indicated they have adequate capacity. The GSD line would be extended from Airport Street and Stanford, there's a manhole there, up to the northern limit of the northern parcel. This shows the utility plan. It's pretty hard to see. However, if you did get a chance to review it or have any questions, or if a member of the public has any questions, the applicant's here to answer those questions. On the right side, it shows a site plan of the fire system, which would consist, it's sort of a package of things as far as how to meet fire flows. The buildings themselves will be Class 1 buildings, meaning like cement buildings. There would be one of the basement levels of the basement level of Building 3, Wellness Center Building 3, would contain a 200,000 gallon water tank, which would not require any additional grading. There would be booster pumps on site, as well as a generator. The system would be looped around the project site to provide, I believe, additional pressure. So that is sort of the package of fire system.
Before we leave that slide.
Yes.
So I see the emergency generator powered fire system.
Yes.
And that lower, is that generator was in the tsunami zone? So if we had a tsunami, it would be flooded? Is that what we're saying?
I'll let Scott answer that. I'm sure there's some consideration there.
Okay,
Okay, great. Yeah, we'll save that question. That's an important question. Let's see. So as far as the rest of the county permitting process, I'll be going to the MCC meeting this evening, presenting a similar presentation. On September 11th, the Coastside Design Review Committee will continue its review of the project, make a recommendation, most likely to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission will likely see this again on October 22nd and possibly make a decision. That would be up to you. On the following items, the actions requested would be approval of the addendum, approval of a use permit for the modern sanitarium component for the developmentally disabled at the Wellness Center. The outdoor boat storage use is actually a conditionally permitted use. Parking uses that are located within the airport overlay are conditionally permitted, as well as reviewing the major subdivision of the north parcel, a minor subdivision of the south parcel, the coastal development permit required for all of these actions, design review permit for the buildings, as well as grading, a grading permit for the reduced grading, as well as a recommendation to the board on a development agreement. We haven't actually released a draft of the development agreement yet, but you will get that far in advance of needing to make a recommendation on it. Okay, so the recommendation at this time is really just to receive the presentation which you have, open up the public hearing, take initial comments and testimony as a part of the courtesy 30-day comment period for the addendum. And staff is here to answer any questions. We have our environmental consultant, the applicant, actually, the Coastside Fire District here to answer any questions. Oh, maybe we'll put it on that site plan slide. Thanks.
Okay,
Thank
well,
you.
I really appreciate your time and patience to give us the update of this report. Do any of the commissioners have any initial questions?
I do, with regards to the water, from the previous project, everything was from the well. Now it's from the Montera Water District.
Yes.
So it kind of just got divided half and half, I guess, for the landscaping and the fire suppression. That's going to be like the well.
No, that's actually going to be potable water from MWSD
okay.
that fills that tank.
All right.
Yes.
So now, so the water, has it been secured? I mean, from the capacity of the Montera Water District, is there any issues regarding that?
Yeah, they have adequate capacity to serve the project domestically to fill the fire tank periodically. However, I should state that there was a fire flow test recently, which fell below what MWSD anticipated to be the actual available flow at the hydrant. So they'll be, MWSD and Coastside Fire and the applicant will sort of be working together to make sure that the fire system, the current fire system really, gets improved to the level that they need to provide fire service. And as well as to perform any additional improvements to accommodate the project. So the project will have its own on-site system, but will need water as well from the hydrant.
I'd like to add to that response, if I may. The use of MWSD water to serve this project will be also subject to review and approval by the San Mateo County Local Agency Formation Commission, because currently the site is outside of their service district boundaries. So that is a matter that will need to be resolved before the project can be constructed.
Got it. All right. Thanks. Yeah. Okay. Those are my questions. Thanks.
Zoe?
And along those same lines, have both the Granada Sanitary District and the Montero Water and Sanitary District dropped their appeals? Are those completely resolved?
They have not. The Committee for Green Foothills actually has, so those are the three main appellants. Committee for Green Foothills has, GSD has not, MWSD has not. We are working together with them on this addendum, making sure that the addendum really addresses all of their concerns. We can have County Council update us on sort of their settlement negotiations.
Okay, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank you. I had one more question, and it has to do with the building height. I think you said that the maximum building height in the north parcel is 36 feet.
Yeah, actually, I have a slide here. Actually, it's just sort of in the back pocket because I wasn't sure if it would come up, but it's at the very end. Excuse me. Let's see here. Oh. It's a lot of information, but the building heights from slab are that third column from the right, and it's 33 feet maximum, and it's the office park buildings that will be reaching the 33, as well as building 4 of the wellness center.
Okay, I think my question then is the building height from slab and the roof elevation, and there's the difference. It's
Yes.
56 feet. The roof elevation is 56 feet.
Yes.
The building height is deemed at 33. I don't understand.
Because the slab is raised from the existing grade. So actually, I would say the real height from existing grade is that last column.
Got it.
Yeah. Because due to tsunami needing to raise the buildings for inundation above the inundation level, the buildings are raised above grade.
Okay, great. Thank
Would it
you.
be a fair comment to say to Zoe, if you're in a trailer park, it feels like it's 57 feet because the whole thing is raised up, even though it's only a 3-story building. It'll feel like a 5-story building from where they are sitting.
I will attempt to answer that question by saying, as I understand it, the top of the slab is not 33 feet above, I'm sorry, 23 feet above existing. Okay, so if we have the existing elevation is at, let's see, 19, right? So you'd have to say 56 minus 19. That would be what it would appear.
So that elevation is above sea level as opposed to
Correct.
topography.
That's correct.
Got it.
So
Thank you.
You're welcome.
also the height difference between existing grade and average finished grade is only like 0 to 3 feet. So it's raised, but it's not raised that much.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
So if I was standing at grade, a normal grade, street level,
Street level grade.
how tall do the buildings feel?
Well, the simulation actually shows that pretty well. It's the viewpoint on Airport Street. This shows that.
So those are 33 approximately feet tall from slab. It looks like another 3 feet of elevation.
Yeah, that seems
From
right.
That's about right.
That's about 36 feet, 3 stories.
Okay, I just wanted to see how, if I was walking down the street, what it felt like.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Oh, please, you want to wait?
For the applicant.
Okay, I have no further questions, so we're going to open this up for the public. Do we have anybody who wishes to speak?
I have 2 speaker slips right now. Can you recommend an amount of time for those speakers?
Let's go with our standard, let's make it 3 minutes. It's just to be clear. And if you plan to speak, will you be nice and kind enough for Heather to fill out a yellow slip, which is right up here, and give it to her so we can call? Excuse me? Sure we can. So go ahead and call our first person.
The applicant prepared a quick presentation. Did you want
Oh,
that
I'm
now,
sorry.
or did you want?
Yes, I like to hear the applicant's application.
I've just been handed a CD, so it'll take me just a minute or two to get this going.
I did bring a hard copy also, and I'll hand it out to you.
Thank you.
See, members of the commission, it's going to be shortened quite a bit because there's a lot of redundant information.
Scott, if you could hang on a sec, I want to make sure that our technical facilities are working, up and working, so that the public can follow along with your presentation as well.
And, you know, excuse me, I have a couple items I can cover while we're getting it set up. I might answer a couple of questions. We are going to farm all the areas that aren't developed. So we do have a riparian boundary that will go around the project, wetlands on the west side and uplands on the east side. But parking lots that aren't needed will continue to be farmed. And I guess I can cover the airport question. It is approach and departures are restricted just to the east for both the existing plan and the future plan.
Okay.
And I laid out the NPA project, which is the North Parcel project, with the assumption that the new ALUC would be approved. And we only have very minor revisions that would have to take place to make that occur. And we put the wellness center outside of the airport overlays, even for the proposed system. So it's in an area that allows residential. The business buildings would have to have a little different subdivision, but the exact same building to comply with the new requirement. And let's see. That, you know, I might have messed up. That doesn't look like the right presentation. Here's another version of it. Sorry. I might just cover a little bit about my background before it starts. I've been a civil engineer for 32 years, which is kind of starting to reveal my age. I've been also involved with a CPALS group on the coast side. My wife helped found it 20 years ago, and it's a group of parents that have supported their children through the educational system, community type systems, and now the housing project. And my involvement with the BigWave project is related directly to my involvement with CPALS. And also with my goal to have my daughter have a place to live that's permanent, stable, and exciting, that I'd like to live there. I've done a number of restoration projects, the Clara Creek project in Pacifica. We planted 150,000 plants, potted plants. We went from 3 red-legged frogs to about 10,000. So it's a very successful restoration. Steelhead at San Pedro Creek, a few hundred to thousands. And this project has that element. We have the same design team that is focusing on wetlands restoration. Their report concludes that every measurable function in terms of habitat is increased just in the restoration we're doing. So I've always enjoyed accomplishing things with strong environmental projects. You can do a number of public works projects. This one meets a housing need that we're desperate for in San Mateo County and the coast. Our CPALS, I recognize that. Our CPALS group includes 160 families just in the coastside area. So that's my daughter and my wife, and they're embarrassed to see that picture. There are a couple of things I wanted to cover that we're essentially on the same timeline as the county, but I did want to say the project was envisioned somewhere between 2000 and 2004, and special needs housing has always been a big part of the project. I've been involved with it since then. My daughter is my motivation, and also the rest of the community that we serve. The two founders and owners have brothers and children in the community, so they've always considered fairly generous donations. To our organization, we received a 5-acre donation, and this latest NPA project will increase it to close to 9 acres, half the overall site. And we, again, the EIR was it was a massive venture. It was interesting, and it was very complete from the county standpoint. It was over $1 million project. Camille brought a few feet of it, but if you stacked it all together with all the appendices, it's about 3.5 feet tall and about 5,000 pages, which is slightly more than the United States medical plan that's being looked at in Obamacare. The Planning Commission approved the project in 2010. It was appealed and approved by the Board of Supervisors. The whole reason for the NPA project has been the Coastal Commission's supporting the appeal. And I worked with Committee for Green Foothills and Lenny Roberts, they were very generous with their time to identify all the issues with the Coastal Commission and address them. And some of this talk is going to be more focused on that. There are a few different issues. Again, we don't have any problems with the county's proposal, so we're consistent. We did have a couple of different goals and different ownership issues that I did want to address. Again, the project goal is just to address the concerns, and I call them requests from the Coastal Commission. We did maintain all the goals and objectives in the Wellness Center. And again, that was providing stable housing and a healthy community. We did maintain the majority of the financial benefits from the business park. And that includes employment, job creation, and financial contributions, square footage issues. And we do have one of the differences in our presentations. One of the business buildings is a wellness center owned building that came over from the 5-acre parcel. So there's really, I'll get into that in a second, but the next picture is really our summary of what the main issues with the Coastal Commission. And again, we went through all the videotapes, all of the letters, and essentially boiled it down to these 8 items. And they wanted to see more habitat protection beyond what the LCP had. We had 100 feet of buffers. Those have been expanded to 150 feet, 250 feet, and in one case, 350 feet. They wanted to see the housing removed from the W zone or the water zone area. And that's essentially the Princeton water development area covered in the LCP, and move the housing up towards the Pillar Ridge housing project. So our housing, and it's kind of a nice, neat planning thing. The housing is all together, and then the business park is better integrated. They wanted to make sure that we were connected with the GSD system, and our negotiations are going well. They're just, there are actually a couple of lawyers here, but they don't go quickly. And we're working well with Montera in terms of those connections, and they're shown on the utilities drawings. The Coastal Commission wanted to see a better integration between the Wellness Center and the business buildings. Our previous projects had them separated quite a ways, and that's no longer the case. They wanted the building height reduced, and the previous building height for the office park was elevation, well, actually a height from slab of 54 feet. We're down to 33 feet. So we've come down almost 15 feet for those buildings. And the elevation, we have typically about 1 to 2 feet of fill, which is our gravel infiltration system below the buildings. But the buildings are built close to existing grade, with the exception of the Wellness Center, which had to be raised a little bit, the 3-story building, to accommodate the concerns for the Coastal Commission. I did want to say real quickly on the tsunami issues. Our generator is located 8 feet higher than a 500-year tsunami event. And I doubt if that particular generator is going to survive 500 years. So we are well above that. And the Coastal Commission took a very conservative look at elevations. We're probably 10 or 12 feet higher than other projects they're approving for tsunamis. That was an issue, though. They held us to the evacuation level. We're actually 6 feet above that. So we can do vertical evacuation, or we have a location to hike to, but we're not intending to drive or remove us from the area because we're safe on that report. Traffic report did reduce the latest one impacts by about 30%, which shows we're about 30% smaller in terms of business development. I did want to say well, I'll kind of cover it a little bit more. The business park was really designed in the previous project that was approved to have minimal impacts, and it actually showed a reduction in traffic along with the current one at the intersections of Highway 1 and 92, because regardless of how you slice it, it's designed to take local residents that commute over the hill and provide larger employment facilities. And we've had at least 3 large employers that have had to move over the hill because there just isn't space for large type facilities. So we're trying to, and those facilities would be added on an as needed basis. And it's not spec. It's if there's a market for it, it'll be built and sold. And I did want to, Camille had a neater slide than this, but I have a 50-cent laser, which means I can point things out if I can get it to work. Oops, I can't get it to work on that screen. But one of the issues that, oh gosh, you have a $500 laser. That's even better. Well, I don't know if it shows on the TV screen, but one of the issues that if you come in, those are on the left-hand upper drawings are the 2-scale drawings of the Wellness Center in the 2010 project, and on the right side in the upper, those are the 2-scale office project buildings. That's a different scale than the horizontal one, but it shows you the difference between what was the Wellness Center before and the office park. We've actually taken the architecture from the Wellness Center at the lower scale and made all of the buildings on the north parcel essentially that height. So you can kind of see what you're approving is a substantial reduction in elevation. Before I go back, I wanted to point out the way we developed the north parcel alternative was, if you look at the north parcel that has the 8 buildings on it, we eliminated 4 buildings from that site. The 2 that were on the left side and the 2 on the right side, and essentially kept the 4 in the middle. Then we moved the Wellness Center to the right side of the site, which took the space of the 2 buildings that were eliminated, and we increased the buffer on the left-hand side. So there's a slight discrepancy in the numbers, but the county had approved 20,000 square feet of business office space owned by the Wellness Center on the south parcel that was intended to be sold to raise money to build the Wellness Center. That 20,000 has been transferred to the north parcel. So the actual development approved on the north parcel for business was 245,000 square feet instead of 225,000. So again, this is the layout that Camille showed, but the main issues that we addressed from the Coastal Commission were we eliminated 4 office buildings, and those were the privately held buildings, and ended up with 4 privately held buildings on the north parcel, 1 that is owned by the nonprofit, and then the rest of the residential buildings. And with that, it allowed us to increase the buffer to the creek that runs through the site to 250 feet on the north parcel and 150 and 350 on the south parcel, and then also an additional 150-foot buffer on the between the wetlands. So we have quite a bit more space around it. We only develop about 60% of the site, which makes us one of the lowest density projects in that area. And I kind of, not as creatively as the county, but I did increase the brown area, which includes Building A as under the ownership of the Wellness Center, and the other 4 buildings are the private concern. Again, it kind of emphasizes the generosity that they had in giving us essentially an equal footprint to the office buildings. So people have said, well, it's a lot larger development, a tiny wellness center and a huge office building, but in reality, the footprint is the same. It's 56,000 for the wellness center and 52,000 for the business park. So that's essentially the same development. So I think that's a different view of it. And again, the business buildings are 33 feet tall. My house is 31 feet tall. And that's a short business building. A typical 2-story building with any kind of air conditioning on top is about 33 feet tall for a business. So we've kept these buildings very small. We have no roof, and I'll cover that in the final slide, but we have no mechanical equipment on top other than solar panels, which are flush mounted. They're not even tilted to keep the profiles of the buildings down. And again, Camille went through these. Essentially, we don't have a lot of fill. The bigger wellness center building is on about 3 feet of fill, 4 feet of fill. And that's all gravel, and it acts as an infiltration system. We have no storm drains on the site. But we're very close to the existing grade, and as Camille showed, there's a huge reduction in cut and fill. We actually had cut and fill. We had a fill on the previous project, about 48,000 cubic yards. We're down to about 20, where it's just gravel. We have no import dirt. We have no excavation on the site. And that was a big concern with the Coastal Commission. They didn't want us to alter the site dramatically. So these buildings are essentially built on the site. The difference between 33 feet and 38 feet is just some of the fill that's associated with one of the buildings. The other ones only are on about 2 feet of gravel, 1 to 2 feet of gravel. And office buildings, again, very short, 3-story. Most likely they'll be developed as 2 stories, but there is a chance that somebody may want to do offices. But again, if they're all developed as 3 stories, we can only get about 3 other buildings on the site before we run out of parking. And the project's controlled by parking and also by footprint. We can't exceed the footprint. We can't exceed the parking spaces.
Can I ask a question at this point?
Yeah, anytime, actually.
You go back to the last slide.
Okay.
You show a logo.
Yeah.
So that is an intent to have signage on some of these buildings?
It is. I'd like it to say Lego. That would be really a good financial boon for us. But that was actually added by the Design Review Committee. I didn't really intend to it because if you look at but we're okay one way or the other. But we are so heavily landscaped. The only place you're going to see the logo is from the sidewalk in front of the building. We have inside the parking lot. We have California sycamores, which grow to 35 feet tall, the building height. And then surrounding the sycamores is a uplands riparian forest, including alders and 3 species of willows that also grow to 30 feet in height. So a logo would be nice, but there's very few places you'll actually be able to see the logo.
My question is for staff. I'm pretty ignorant about signage ordinances. Does the county have one even?
Yes, this would be the M1 site. So there are some signage requirements. This would be, I think they're pretty generous for the M1. For the LCP though, there's also requirements pertaining to signs. The applicant wasn't proposing a freestanding sign or any signage on site. So actually I had added it. One as sort of an idea of how the building would really look once occupied. And also our design review officer thought it would be a good way to break up that stucco panel.
And we allow signs this large or larger, or I don't know that.
It's just a general location.
I mean, just do our regulations say cannot exceed a number of square feet, or is it a free-for-all in terms
It's pretty generous in the M1.
Pretty generous.
Yeah, in the M1, yeah, it's pretty generous.
Okay, I just.
Right. But I would say the constraining factors are more LCP related, visibility related.
I was just so ignorant about it, I had no idea what our requirements were or weren't.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. Again, these were things we saw. One of the goals the Coastal Commission had, they didn't want any blockage of any ridge lines or coastal views from Highway 1. And this is, I wish I had Camille's quality slide. This is, but again, the upper is before and the lower is after. And we specifically relocated the buildings in a manner that it tucks it within the ridge line. And this is actually the worst vantage point. If you go farther up Highway 1, it's blocked by cypress trees and everything else. So that they picked the worst possible site in terms of its impact on the ridge lines. Again, this is from more typical Capistrano. The buildings are about a quarter of the height of the ridge. And that also is the ridge that blocks the direct wind to the airport. The San Carlos Airport has no ridge between it on a west wind, and the buildings are what affect the airflow. This one, the wind is essentially tunneled up and down the runway. South on a south wind, west is actually, pardon me, it's on a typical storm setting, you might have a southwest that'll come up the airport, but our buildings are out of the wind pattern. That was what was shown in the DEIR and FEIR. So a very different set of conditions than the concern they had at San Carlos. And again, this viewpoint shows our buildings pretty much blend in with the development. We had a little bit of a debate between how high our trees are going to be and how high the visual guy put them in. I think they're higher because we have a number of restoration projects that the trees are substantially higher. And we are very close to the water table. So the trees are going to get their feet in the ground or in the water pretty easily. So once they get going, they'll keep going. And our goal is hidden, hidden in native trees, So again, the building, this was almost correct, but they put the sycamores on the front when it's really the change we had from the design review. We'll show the riparian, not the riparian, but the uplands forested habitat, which is essentially, in this case, we're actually having alders and willows. So it'll be a lot more broken, and then it'll transition into the taller California sycamores in the parking lot. So that we just have to push the bigger trees back a little bit out of the view and run more natural natives. And that's actually in the landscaping plan, so it's not a change we have to make. Again, people are saying that, I might go back, that our buildings are way out of scale with Half Moon Bay. But I just went and took an afternoon, and this is about what the office park size is. That's in the city of Half Moon Bay. Oops. This is another one in Half Moon Bay, office height and scale, and larger, substantially higher than, and that's in Princeton, and larger in terms of footprint. And again, this is the shorter version of the senior housing. Even the smaller buildings are taller and larger than our office buildings in Princeton. Again, same height as the office building. This one's about the fire department. It's about the height of our biggest wellness building, but smaller. Let's see. Again, there's some housing projects in Half Moon Bay that are higher and larger in scale. These buildings that are actually just south of the project are about the same height as our buildings. Again, another building, a little higher than ours. And the church is actually taller. And then these buildings in Princeton are actually higher than the buildings we're proposing. Another building, I could go on forever. There's quite a few buildings. We're not very untypical. And landscaping plan, Camille showed this. We do have a request from the Coastal Commission. They wanted to keep us growing things. We have up to 6 acres that'll be maintained in organic farmland, up to 8 acres that'll be restored. And the difference is some of it will be a little bit larger restoration, a little less farming. But we have some flexibility. But again, most of the site's undeveloped. We actually improve every aspect of the biological community with our restoration. Not only does it protect it, it improves it. That was a request of the commission. And oops, that's an older slide here too. We are at 20 feet above the storm surge, but we're 6 feet above the evacuation plan for our first floor elevation, 25 feet above the highest flood level, 20 feet above the highest recorded tsunami. That's 20 feet above the highest one in 200 years, and 28 feet above the highest projection for global warming. So we're pretty comfortably above the terror that can be whipped at us from the ocean. And again, we showed we're well out of the, our trench showed that there had been no displacement on the site in the last 12,000 years. And the county's building department was barely in existence 12,000 years ago. So we're looking at very long periods of time. We're probably tsunami, we're closer to the million year. I mentioned we're 14 feet above the 500-year event. So they're 20 feet above a 200-year event. So that we're kind of very safely designed in this area. Traffic, about a 30% reduction from what we had previously, mostly because we have less office facilities. And a lot of detail in agreement with the county, with the exception that the wellness center has gone down a little bit in terms of residential and gone up a little bit in terms of a sellable piece of commercial land. And that's shown 70,000 square feet of wellness center and 27,000 feet of building to be sold for revenue for the. But we essentially have the same wellness center development, but a reduction in the for-profit business from 225 to 162. And a lot, you know, I recalculated the grading. We had a mistake in the DEIR and FEIR. A lot of excavation and fill reduced by hundreds of %. So that was a goal that we had with the commission. And again, this shows a tilted version of panels. Our panels are going to be flat, 6 inches high above the building. All of our heat, well, we actually have passive solar, wind, and voltaic powered systems. All of our heat's solar. Cooling, we use our soil mass system and a natural ventilation system. Fuel cells for communication backup, and then we have a generator. Our fire generator is going to run on recycled vegetable oil. So that's a hobby of mine, time-wasting hobby of mine. And again, we met all the goals and objectives of the wellness center. It'll be a great place to live for our community. And we've really worked hard the last 2 years to work out all the appeals and lawsuits and meet all the conditions of the Coastal Commission. I just took the position, whether I agreed with things or not, we were going to agree with it. And it's been a very good couple of years.
Okay.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the time, too. I get long-winded sometimes.
Do any of the commissioners have questions of the applicant? Go for it.
Okay.
Let me try. Now it's on. So one of the questions that occurred to me as I was reading this proposal or looking at the addendum is, what happens in 50 years if this project, if the wellness center isn't utilized in the way you envision? Are there, and you want to turn it into a hotel or something like that? How would that work?
Well, one of the things the county has to do is approve a use permit, which is specifically for a special needs residential, because it's not an area that's zoned for regular residential. So you have a special use permit that has to be approved. And that use permit would be for anywhere in the county, actually, for this type of housing. So we're a nonprofit. If we go broke, I'm not going to be involved in it. But whoever acquires it has to have a use permit that's approved by the Planning Commission and if they're going to do housing there. So most likely it would be converted to some kind of more within the M1 zoning, and then they're still restricted by the parking. We take 42 parking spaces for the wellness center, which is with guests, plus we had, some of those are actually access parking spaces, beach access. So whatever happens to us, if we disappear, somebody still has to go back to the Planning Commission to get things approved. Whatever it is, they can't build much if the parking spaces have already been taken up by the commercial piece. So, but we have a vibrant need, and I don't see it ever disappearing in terms of the need. I'm not the best on the facts on this, but I think there's 18,000 county residents that need housing like this, and there's about well under 2,000 units, and there's none on the coast side, and we have 180 just in our group. So we're not even going to come close to meeting the needs, and people out there are desperate for this type of housing. So our biggest issue is we're trying to make it low-income housing, but we have a lot of wealthy people that would like to put their children there. But our community is primarily low-income, so that's our goal in this whole thing. So hopefully that wasn't too long-winded. But
Fine. Another question, the phasing over 15 years, what if some portion isn't built in 15 years? Does that mean you can't build it after?
Well, it means that nothing can be built. I think the goal was why we had 15 years is that we have a project approved that can't be developed immediately. Like we're not going to build an office building unless there's a demand for it. We're only going to build wellness center units relative to the financing and the demand. And 15 years gives us a comfortable envelope. 10 years is probably more realistic. But anything that takes beyond 15 years, it has to go back to the Planning Commission to be approved. And that's the only benefit of a development agreement. Things could still be approved, but they can't be approved without additional hearings and CEQA documents and all that stuff.
So in other words, if several of the office buildings aren't built in 15 years, and in 20 years, then somebody goes, oh, we really want that, you then have to
We have to go back to you to get, and you can deny it, or you can ask for additional. There may be a number of things that happen that could prevent that, or no demand for it, but it would have to come back. And from this project, we've been almost involved for 15 years. I used to think that was a long period of time, but it's not a long period of time.
Okay, another question. I noticed that you have a variety of businesses associated, and one of them is a transportation business, the BigWave, what are you calling it?
Yeah,
transportation. And you have a shuttle that's associated with that. What kind of additional requirements are you envisioning, if any, from Samtrans?
Well, we'd like to push for additional bus service. They're cutting back service, but I think we have enough demand that they could increase the routes.
Paratransit or
well, we're involved with Ready Coast right now, and we have there's a couple of other ones. So we're gonna kind of combine with that. Our shuttle would be a very convenient way for our residents to get to someplace without having, if it's not directly on a bus route or something else. But we're really good bus riders. We have most of our people get around and doing it. But I think we can also do some neighborhood pickup because we're looking at trying to encourage local employment, and that's a source of revenue for us in terms of having a convenient vehicle, plus start developing clients that we can pick up during the day. And we do have a lot of bike issues. It's a great location for bicycles, and we have bike storage issues on the buildings and things like that. So
you are envisioning increasing demand or increased demand with Samtrans for Ready Coast or Ready Wheels.
If they don't, you never can tell what funding is going to be. We'll increase the supply of our own shuttle system. It'll be small and convenient if they have a large response in the bus. But if the bus is every couple of hours or every 4 hours, then it doesn't really help people getting to, medical appointment or something like that. So, or work for that matter.
Okay. Let's see. I noticed that you indicate too that you have a native plant nursery that's intended to grow 15 to 30,000 plants for a while to be used in landscaping, and then that will be phased out.
I think there'll always be some value of it. What's really nice about most of the native plants, they're either grown from cuttings, some seed, and we were going to grow our own plants. And just for our restoration, it's probably close to 30,000 pots, and we have the pots and everything else. But there is a kind of a thriving business between Peninsula Open Space, Caltrans, always requiring plants, and they actually sell for about $6 each. So I think we have a revenue source of And it's a potting yard. It's not going to be a greenhouse. It'll be a fenced-in area to keep the skunks off it, basically. So.
My last question has to do with gray water, and it seems like this is probably an old issue that's gone around the block a few times before I was on the Planning Commission.
Yeah.
So if you could describe to me why we're not using gray water, or why we're not.
Well, it was really controversial, I think, and my skeptics' view would be it was a good way to unravel things. But I have a lot of experience. This was actually a complete water recycling system that was proposed. It wasn't just gray water; it was on black water also. And my background's wastewater and water, and it's a lot easier to recycle sewage than it is to recycle gray water. It has a lot more food in it, but it's a lot more difficult regulatory-wise, and there's a lot more questions on it. But I'm afraid to admit that we're probably going to have a gray water system that's pretty extensive, because that's not under the purview of sanitary districts allowed by the building code. And going into a drought, it would be irresponsible not to do it. So it's not, again, it's not covered because it's allowed. But again, if somebody tells us we can't do it, then we won't do it. But I'd like to do it.
So the major stumbling block there was using gray water for irrigation that could then somehow pollute the marsh.
Yeah, the main stumbling block was actually using black water and treating it at tertiary level and filtering it, and UV disinfection. That becomes starts entering the area of utility districts. They don't like to see private plants operating it because it's harder to control it from a regulatory standpoint. So that's where we really ran amok, was that we proposed a complete environmental system. Water quality of it, I think, would have been very good, but regulatory-wise, it's very difficult. And gray water, again, isn't, it's encouraged, it's not regulated, per se. It's a building code issue. It's obviously the health department wants to make sure you're doing it right. But we'll probably do that, and we'll probably have that as part of our building permits. And that would be shower water or sink washing, or, But you still can't just throw it in the environment. We'd have to do a slow sand filter. We'd have to basically remove all the organic material. A household would tend to just dump it out there, but soap and all that stuff's bad for plants. So
I guess it would not be part of this proposal?
It's technically not, but I have to debate whether one of the reasons it's not is GSD needs to at least give it the nod. We haven't totally worked it out with them. Their concern is that there's nobody out here from GSD, but they do want to maximize how much they charge us, and they're afraid if we don't generate sewage, that's going to be a reduction in fees. That's completely off the record statement. But again, I've run sanitary districts, and revenue is an important factor in that district. But I'm sure if we still paid them for it, we could probably do it.
That's all for now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any questions?
No questions from me, but thank you. I think your presentation clarified a lot of things I had in my mind. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much for your time. We're going to take a 10-minute bio break. It also gives us a chance to upgrade the tapes because this is being recorded. So we'll come back 10 minutes to 11.